alone in the castle. What in daylight seemed to be an impressive, majestic structure now seems eerie and frightening. The shadows reach out as your light ineffectually chases the dark. It didn't take long for you to lose your way in the labyrinthine passageways. You turn and see a glimpse of white turn down a corridor. Was that a person? Perhaps you aren't as alone as you feared. You call out and follow. Another corridor and another flash of white just ahead, turning out of view. You quicken your pace. You turn the corner, and there is a lady wearing a white gown. Her back is turned to you. You are filled with a sudden apprehension. She slowly turns to face you, and you realize the glow is not coming from the candle she holds, but radiates softly from her entire being. You try to compose yourself and begin to ask for directions out of the maze. She slowly raises a finger to her lips, and you are struck mute. She glides closer to you, then says, "Beware the coming of the light." You blink, and her soft features wither into a hideous corpse. Face locked in a silent scream. You drop your light, you bend to retrieve it, and you find the lady is gone. You are once more alone, but can't shake the feeling of her eyes staring into your soul. You also can't forget her warning. You have encountered the lady in white. Welcome to the Low Murmur. Prior to delving into this urban legend, please take a moment to like, share, subscribe, all the pleasantries that keep this podcast alive. Turning to the dead, let's take a closer look at the middle-aged folklore that became the oldest urban legend on record, the Lady in White. I'm currently working on a project that involves the global ladies in white phenomenon, so pardon my exuberance. Lean in closer and listen. The version of the Lady in White most people recognize stems from Slavic tradition, which likely reaches back even farther into the ancient past. The prototype, sometimes known as Poludnitsa or the Noon Witch, would appear as either a fair maiden or an old hag wearing a long white dress. She would punish agricultural workers for not resting during the hardest time of the day. Sometimes she would ask riddles. Her goal was to be a cautionary sign for children and farmers, part nature sprite, part transformational spirit. In the high Middle Ages, the idea began to morph with the growth of cities. Food surpluses, due to innovations in agriculture, led to expansions in trade routes. This in turn led communities to cluster near waterways, trade routes, and castles. The population moved, and the Lady in White went with them. She was no longer found in the field, but near the water, at a crossroads, or in a castle. She moved from the soil to the streets. As the concept evolves, variations creep in. For example, in Germany, the woman is still wearing a long white dress, but she is tied to a particular place or family. Perhaps the most famous Lady in White, sometimes called the first that fits the modern mythos, begins in the 14th century. The legend goes the Countess Kunigunde of Orlamünde, after being widowed, fell in love with Albrecht the Handsome. While only his nickname and no further description of the gentleman remains, we can assume he was quite striking for the time, and this wasn't an ironic nickname. His parents objected to the union. Albrecht lets it be known to Kunigunde and all and sundry that he would gladly marry her if there weren't 4 eyes standing in the way. Not realizing he means his parents, she believes he means her children, ages 2 and 3. She was so besotted, she killed her 2 children in the hopes of finally being with the man she loved. Upon hearing what she had done, Albrecht rejects Kunigunde. She slinks off to Rome and, no doubt after paying a hefty fee, is pardoned of sin as long as she starts a new monastery and agrees to never leave it. After she died, the residents of a castle built by Count Otto's ancestors said the Lady in White appeared to warn them of things like impending war, deaths, and other general misfortunes. Then a gentleman tried to take over the castle at Plassenburg in the 16th century. The Lady in White was outraged and went the whole Jacob Marley route with rattling chains and shrieking. Some accounts go so far as to say 2 servants were killed before the would-be new owner of the castle fled. Since then, others from the same family line have said she has appeared numerous times, sometimes at the same time in different locations, to warn of some impending doom. As this features elements that so many of the Lady in White stories will take, let's look at it a little closer. Yes, there was a Countess Kunigunde of Orlamünde. She was married to Count Otto VI of Orlamünde, who died in 1340. There was a prince known as Albrecht the Handsome, who was alive at this very time. Although they did know each other, there's no proof there was anything romantic between Kunigunde and Albrecht. If there was, would his parents have objected? I read somewhere that they would have rejected her as she was destitute. That doesn't quite ring true. Beyond her personal fortune, when Count Otto died, she was granted 3,000 pounds of hella, literally 3,000 pounds of tiny silver coins. In today's currency, that's roughly $2.5 million. What his parents might have objected to is her age. The average lifespan in 1340 was 30 to 35 years. As nobles, they'd have a few extra years, but at 37, Countess Kunigunde was probably not seen as a sweet young thing. Albrecht would have been 21. Fun fact, she outlived Albrecht by 21 years. Albrecht did marry, but not until 1348. The same way we know Kunigunde wasn't destitute is the same way we know she and Otto didn't have any children for her to murder. She and Otto had adopted a girl who was given money at the time of her marriage to a knight, but they otherwise had no children. I'm only speculating, but I think this story might have originated with members of Otto's family who were bitter about his will. As he had no male heirs, he left his territory and primary seat, that same Plassenburg castle, to Johann II of Nuremberg, who, and you might have seen this coming, is Albrecht's brother. At the time, it was such a large territory, Johann became known in some circles as Johann the Acquirer. The real-life Kunigunde gave Johann and Albrecht 5,000 pounds of hella for Grundloch Castle and Village, where she founded the Himmeltron Abbey. In the paperwork for the sale of Grundloch, they refer to her as our dear aunt, Lady Kunigunde, hardly the epithet for a child murderer. She spent another 5,000 pounds of hella on masses for her parents, Otto, and herself. She eventually gave the abbey all her wealth and became the abbess there. That sounds more like a very pious woman than a guilty one to me, but I can see a bitter family member of Otto's being upset about the arrangement. It might interest you to know that a German researcher, Dr. Martin Fahler, found evidence that in 1486, at a different castle, courtiers would dress themselves as the lady in white to scare away visitors, particularly those they found to be loathsome or bothersome. 2 years later, a lady of the court at Plassenburg began doing the same. Soon everyone wanted a turn at being the lady in white. This helps cement the tale in the minds of people and explains why the lady in white didn't warn them the Bavarians were going to burn the castle down in 1554, but did appear shortly after, very angry. What's fascinating about the lady in white is how this phenomenon, with some cultural changes, can be found in so many distinct cultures. They fall into a few distinct categories. There's the lady in white who murdered her children. There's the lady in white who met a violent death. Sometimes there's the lady in white who murdered her children and then met a violent death. They usually are seen as a warning. They do not all live in castles. For example, in French folklore, the lady in white is more like a malevolent fairy. As in the Slavic traditions, the French nature spirits have riddles and tests that must be passed. They usually are found in areas a traveler must pass, like a ravine or a bridge. Sometimes they will demand the traveler dance with them in order to continue on their journey. This gives them a seductive edge, although they aren't interested in their prey that way. In one version of the Normandy legend of the Chamber of Maidens, 3 sisters are harassed and stalked by a local lord while the fiancés are away fighting a war. They hide in the ravine between 2 massive rocks. The lord finds them, and, his passion quelled by his anger, has them walled up. The locals hear them crying for 3 days, but can't find them. Then the crying stops. Angels turn their souls into ladies in white, and sailors on the English Channel can still see them clad in white and hear their mournful cries. What's important with these French versions is the association with traveling, whether it's over a bridge or across the channel. As I mentioned, the agricultural surplus that led to cities also led to expanded trade routes. That includes crossroads, rivers, bridges, and later, highways. I find the lady in white mythos to be one of the most universal we can identify, although some aspects are the same, but with different cultural connotations. Dating back at least 1,000 years, the phenomenon is even found in Mesoamerica before a documented exposure to Europeans. While she is known before their time, the Aztecs called her Cihuacoatl. She was a creation goddess who wore a long white gown. She left her son, sometimes identified as Mixcoatl, at the crossroads. He was transported into the heavens and became the Milky Way. Where his physical form had been on Earth, there was a flint knife like those used in sacrifices. And here I will make a very short aside. The Aztec used flint knives as more of a ceremonial or decorative item, perhaps worn or flourished during a sacrifice. The actual cutting was done with an obsidian knife, as obsidian is very strong and can make very precise cuts. I found this out for myself when, as a young archaeology student, I took a summer course that included embracing our inner hunter by acquiring flint, then napping that flint into an arrowhead or a knife. As a special treat, the professor had just been given some obsidian that she was sure we would really enjoy napping. so we could see just how different it was. While doing just that, I had a flake of obsidian break off unexpectedly. It cut through my pants and into my knee. I still have the scar. Of interest to no one other than myself, on my first dig, I was also cut by a 16th century bird point arrowhead made of flint. While I didn't even feel the obsidian cut me until after I saw the blood, that flint arrowhead hurt instantly. There was nothing surgical about that wound. I bring this up as an anecdote, but also because I think it is very important to help explain the Aztec state of mind. A ceremonial knife is left, sometimes described as in a crib, in place of the sun. The sun is fine, divine even. The knife is symbolic. Yes, Cihuacoatl is sad when she is on Earth because she is separated from her son, but she knows she just needs to look up to see him, albeit from a distance. Sacrifices are necessary, but the pain is temporary and needed for the celestial to continue. It's a simple myth, but to Bernardino de Sahagun, the Spanish friar who recorded the myth in the Florentine Codex in the 1550s, he had his own cultural baggage to go along with it. In the late Middle Ages, early modern period, and earlier in Spain, crossroads had some very specific meanings, just like the Aztecs, and before them, the Xochimilca. The Spanish believed crossroads were liminal spaces where the veil is very thin between walls. I speculate this has something to do with possibilities. What is a crossroad but a place where a decision must be made? Left, right, straight, turn around. You might meet a fellow traveler coming towards you. Where did they come from? Is it worth traveling there? How far into the unknown or anecdotally known are you willing to go? In Spain, they had the Lady in White castle-style ghosts like the White Lady of Alcazar of Segovia, but they also had La Infantina, who was a cursed princess living in a tree at a crossroads. That myth is based on encantadas, who were pre-Christian nature goddesses, much like those white ladies in France. But they also had the Lavandere de Noite, the night washerwoman. She appears at midnight near water or at rural crossroads near a stream. She is wearing all white as she washes bloody clothing. If she sees a traveler, she will ask him to help her with her task. They cannot say no. If they wring the clothes out in the same direction she does, they will soon die or be cursed. The observant traveler who wrings them out the opposite direction of the washerwoman will be spared. Well, spared except for never knowing whose blood was on those clothes. So when Friar Bernardino de Sahagun hears the story, he equates Cihuacoatl with the same kind of evil spirit as the night washerwoman. He doesn't see Cihuacoatl as a warrior goddess who is dropping her kid off to catch the celestial bus. She sees a mother who abandoned her child. The crying is not out of their temporary separation, but from the guilt she feels. Who took her child? Well, they left a knife. I'm sure Friar Bernardino imagined the child was sacrificed. The cultural symbolism is different. The Aztecs and the Spanish had different connotations. It's another example of their cultural clash. The same misunderstanding of connotation and connection is why some people mistakenly believe the Spanish version of Cihuacoatl is what led to the more modern urban legend of La Llorona. Was it inspiration? Well, in my opinion, not really. The first time La Llorona is found in print is the 1849 sonnet by Manuel Carpio. is the story of a woman named Rosalia who is murdered by her ne'er-do-well husband. Her spirit, weeping and wailing, haunts the town along the river. The name La Llorona is popularized in 1917 with Francisco C. Neve's play. He took Carpio's brief poem and added details to make it an allegory about the class system. Luisa is a peasant. She loves Ramiro, an upper-class, wealthy man. They have a child. Ramiro deserts both Luisa and the child to marry the daughter of a judge. Luisa goes mad and kills the child to spite Ramiro. She's caught and sentenced to death. She returns from the grave to wail and stalk Ramiro. Now, doesn't it sound a lot more like a certain German countess than an Aztec goddess? I think this might be where the real cultural contamination into the modern legend happens, not with Friar Bernardino. Another modern urban legend with more ancient roots also has some overlap with the lady in white phenomenon, the vanishing hitchhiker. Many versions of this tale involve a woman in white. Sometimes she asks the driver to stop at a cemetery and she disappears. Sometimes she reminds the driver to slow down. Occasionally, she's crying or distressed in some way. The vanishing hitchhiker isn't modern. There's even a chap in the Bible who disappears from a chariot. But Johan Petri Klint, a Swedish priest, politician, and collector of omens, wrote in a 1602 manuscript about this very experience. It almost sounds like a joke. A priest, 2 farmers, and a ghost walk into a bar. It actually goes something like this. A Lutheran priest and 2 farmers were traveling in a horse-drawn sleigh, returning home after visiting a market. They're on a well-traveled but snowy path. They see a beautiful young maid. She signals to them. They stop, and she says she would like to travel with them for a while. They are more than happy to oblige. Along the way, they stop at a roadside inn. The maid orders a jug of beer. The innkeeper pours it, only to find the jug is filled with malt. The maid says that means there will be a good grain harvest this year. He tries it a second time, and it is filled with acorns. She says that means there will be a good harvest of fruit on the trees. 3 times the charm usually, but this time the jug is filled with blood. She says that means there will be war and pestilence. Then she disappears. As it happens, the Little Ice Age hit Sweden very hard in 1602 and 1603, so there was famine rather than abundance. It was a safe bet to say Sweden would be at war. It was kind of their thing at the time. The Polish-Swedish War had started about 2 years earlier, but 1602 and 1603 were punctuated with stunning losses for the Swedes. While they managed to keep the fighting off their shores, it caused massive economic issues, while the constant military drafts were depleting the labor pool. And then came the plague of 1603. Many people have rephrased these omens as possible timelines. Everything would have been great if they could have ended the war. As an interesting side note, Klint and most of Sweden thought of King Charles IX as a violent usurper. They felt his violating rule by divine right had caused the entire country to be punished. While Klint made his tale sound like it was hot off the press's supernatural warning, I think it was really a propaganda tool. Regardless, it does make for a good ghost story. And it also brings us to the end of our story for the week. I'll keep you updated on my Ladies in White project. Let me know if there's any other ghost stories you'd like to hear more about. Join me next time as we unearth the true Revolutionary War casualty behind the legend of Sleepy Hollow. Until then, listen for the Low Murmur.